Please be aware this will be a spoiler-filled discussion. Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society, where we're ticking all the boxes and providing minority perspective in popular internet discourse. I'm Tilly, my pronouns are she and her, and I lead the film discussions.
I'm Josh, my pronouns are he and him, and I lead the music discussions.
And today is the second part in our Mariachi trilogy review,
Mm.
or series. Today we're talking about Desperado, the second film in said franchise.
Yeah.
Pretty immediate follow-up to first film in the trilogy, but first we're just gonna have a little preamble, where we once again talk about film distribution, and what a nightmare it is. Very briefly, the reason I wanted to talk about this was because I'm back at uni at the minute, and I, for some reason, just I think it's just my lifestyle. I watch a lot more films when I'm away at university.
Mm.
Uh, but it comes with a price. Because pretty much every time I go on Letterboxd and have a look around on my watch list, I kind of also have a list of films that I look at. The films I'm like, oh, I want to watch this in the immediate future, because the watch list is like an endless hell of films that you will never see all of. So it's a good to have a shorter version. Uh, I will go to watch this film or look at where I can watch it, and without fucking fail, it is always £3.50 to rent on Amazon Prime. And like I said, I'm a student and I don't have a lot of money, and it's just like I'm trying to be cheap. I'm spending a night in, and like this shouldn't cost me money to like treat myself, sit at home, watch a film. It should be easy, but like, oh, it's every time I finally find a film, I'm like, yeah, this is the one for the night. Let's go see how I watch it. I have to pay. Uh, and it's ridiculous because I think it's ridiculous in the light of music streaming. Mainly is my problem. You can, if someone recommends you an album, it's not a financial responsibility. It's just go and listen to that album. uh and obviously that's kind of reductive, but also I'm getting really sick of this. It's just ridiculous.
I was gonna say, I think in games we're also seeing like art becoming more affordable, like with Steam sales,
Yeah.
Game Pass, constantly games being on sale. Like hey, they Witcher 3 is just £5. You get with 3 and all of the DLC. Like that's really fucked up. That's very good.
No, that's amazing. And I really hate boiling like content, like art down to content and hours, which, like kind of game review websites will be like, how much bang are you getting for your buck? But to speak on like films to movies, it adds up, because yeah, you can get an older game for almost as cheap as it costs to just rent a 90-minute film nowadays. And like you said, Steam sales have been around for
Mm.
ages, and they keep things low. But I think it's really Game Pass that sold it out to me. You can get Game Pass and you can reliably, even if you don't play every game that you would want to, like even if every game that you'd want to play isn't there, your time is constantly occupied by games that you would want to play. Like you can't play all of the games you'd want to play on Game Pass in a month, I would say. Uh, which isn't the same for something like Amazon Prime, or Netflix even, because there are specific films that I want to watch and they're never free. They are
I
never
find
free.
I find having access to I hmm, I think for me there's a thing about like there is a critique here about class and space, like what spaces are given art.
Yeah.
And I look at like the film Titan recently came out, which I really want to watch. Where can I watch new film? And I think the closest cinema is like miles away. I
It's
can't leave the city to
ridiculous.
watch a film.
Oh
and
yeah.
and yeah, I don't really get this. There is a feeling of how much you earn matters.
And that's within the industry as well, because those films are made more independently. They don't have as much backing from the industry. Uh and so they
I
don't get the
thought
same distribution,
I
so they
thought
don't
this
get
would
as
change
seen
with
by as
going
many people.
digital.
I think my point of view in this is like I know, like there are obviously reasons in the industry right now for why it is the way it is, but I just think when literally every other kind of at-home entertainment media is outperforming film in terms of accessibility and distribution, things have to change. And like you said, like we're in the digital era. There is no scarcity of the film. There are not three end games in the world. They are everywhere. Uh and it's yeah, I mean it's one of those things where the problem is capitalism. Like the problem is that this is the current business model. Uh but just I mean every change from like previous ways of accessing media has come from just a change in the industry. Like I don't know, some rogue that has changed everything. I mean, short slowly but surely, like Napster,
Mm,
for music, revolutionizing music streaming.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
but it's just really frustrating because nothing has changed. Like I just for so long, I'm
Yeah.
sick of having to pay money, to be honest, when I'm already paying money to access these things. Like there are just no films on streaming for free.
I feel like in the next 10 years, we will be seeing a conversation about how to make, well, films are still very attached to like an old model of
Yeah.
big box office money. Uh, and it's very clear when you see really weird tone deaf stuff like costing upwards to £15 to watch like the shitty Black Widow movie on a streaming service that you already own and pay for.
Yeah.
Like weird expectations of how much money they want to be making, uh, persisting post kind of cinemas being less prominent after a pandemic. And I think we
Yeah.
definitely saw this with like music in the 2000s and currently of artists really struggling to make money. I think it's easier to sympathize with like an artist, like five people, versus like a studio. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I get it. Like if you're like an independent studio and films are really expensive, how do you
Yeah.
make returns? But I don't doubt that there is like dudes in a boardroom somewhere, aren't involved in the artistic process trying to make a buck here. Um,
Oh
that
yeah.
convolute it and gatekeep it. So I don't. It's complicated. I feel like undereducated on the subject to speak confidently about it. Other than just like I just really want to watch films sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, but I think that's like a good enough perspective when everything else has changed. Like film is probably I mean I study film, it's what I want to do with my career in some capacity. So like it's my primary like entertainment.
I
And
think
so
it's
it's
like
just
C tier
really
in terms of all the mediums.
yeah, but I just so when it's so considerably worse than everything else. Like I never the barrier to entry is the highest in sort of my favorite avenue of media, and it's just incredibly frustrating. Uh and then that's not even getting me started on all of the issues with just when films come out. Uh I mean, Josh, we was talking about before we recorded of like how Last Night in Soho, June, French Dispatch, loads of stuff just all comes out at the same time. And it's all in that same niche of directors, like of like pretty popular
Yeah, auteur,
filmmakers who
auteur cinema.
yeah, auteur filmmakers who people get routinely excited for their films to come out.
Mm.
They just always come out at the same time and it's just ridiculous and I'm so sick of it
I
as
don't know if I can necessarily complain about those three films being released in the same week because they they're being released at the same time everywhere and they've been slated for this release. They're all getting like wide releases immediately. I think what's
yeah.
I don't know who I could point fingers at for that, or if I'm even that mad at it. It's just like a funny thing.
I've
I think what's interesting is when the art films come out in like a year ago, and then
yeah.
in the UK at least, roughly November to January
Oh
time,
yeah.
they get wider releases. So you finally get to watch The Lighthouse after like 10 months of everyone telling to watch it. And that actually really hurt like Parasite for me. Where like there was a good 10 months of people saying, yeah, this is the best film ever made. And I'm like, what okay. And so going into this, my expectations are so ridiculously high. And it's
Ridiculously
just like a
high.
normal good film. It's like, oh, it's just a film. Like it didn't change my life.
Yeah.
It was good. And stuff like that I really hate. Yeah.
For me, those two things speak to the same issue, though, of just like all the good films come out in the same time of the year. Uh, and then the rest of the year, you're just stuck waiting around. And so I just kind of actually become like insanely busy and spending far more money at the cinema. Kind of from, I'd say, like November onwards towards like, because I'm in the UK, maybe like the
Mm.
end of January. And it's really annoying. Like because I love going to the cinema, and it's genuinely become like a seasonal hobby for
Yeah,
me. Uh,
I don't know if I could I don't know if I could systemically be angry about that though. Like
I find that very annoying because I just would like to see good films all year a lot of the time, and good films
fair
do come
enough.
out, but they are the only other films that come out in the rest of the year are like films that get summer distribution, uh, and like occasionally you'll get The Suicide Squad, which like is a great summer film, uh, but a lot of the time, like, well, it's a kind of about the genres you don't see, and I'm a lot more into a lot of the genres you see later in the year, and it's just very annoying for me, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Um
Anyway, I think we should move on to talking about Desperado.
yeah, sure.
So like I said, this is the second film in Robert Rodriguez's Mariachi trilogy.
Mm.
Uh, our beloved Mariachi has been recast. Uh, but I think it's, well,
Mm, kind of.
kind
It's
of.
a weird film.
He's okay. Yeah, right out the back, right out the gate. This is a bizarre film. It's the same guy. He's still there, but they're friends instead now. Like the original
Very
mariachi
funny.
is just in his band. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking, is that the fucking real mariachi? And
Is that
yeah,
the
like,
guy?
is that
Cause
the
I
guy?
okay, I guess before we like jump into that discussion, give them a rundown on what
Yeah.
happens in Mariachi 2, Desperado.
So in Desperado, uh, it opens the first frame of the film. Is Steve Buscemi walking into a bar, which
Sweaty
was
Steve Buscemi.
sweaty Steve Buscemi, which was genuinely exciting, and he tells a story of our mariachi walking into a bar and taking out a gang of thugs, and you get to watch the action scene happening, and it's like it's a fun scene. Uh, and then what unfolds is, I mean, he's just kind of hunting for this one guy called Bucho,
Yeah.
and I honestly couldn't tell you the like how these scenes are connected together.
I
Like sitting
I
here right now.
so okay. I do think some parts of this are confusingly edited because so
Okay.
it's really interesting. I think Robert Rodriguez is in the genre of uh in terms of like thinking of like film makers kind of as movements. I think he is in the
Mm,
same cultural movement as like Tarantino. Uh and I think Tarantino operates in a very like compulsive, exciting space. I think whereas
yeah.
Tarantino compulsively reaches for dialogue, Rodriguez compulsively reaches for like over the top action.
Yeah.
So there will often just be like Danny Trejo with throwing knives, and I'm like, who is this guy? How is he connected to the plot? And it's a very
Yeah.
like compulsive, cool action scene moment, and
Yeah.
that just further like confuses me about the plot. I think the plot is a revenge story attacking a guy who is tenuously linked to the
Yeah,
guy from the first film who killed his girlfriend. And that is the plot.
yeah. I would honestly say that tenuously is like is a nice way of putting it. There is never any explanation of how this man is specifically connected to the murder we see in the
it
first film.
it does get
Like
to a
so
point where I wonder if this is intentional.
no so yeah I with this film I feel like or really to go back to the first film in the trilogy, I feel like there were two avenues he could have that they were kind of opening up. There
Mm.
was the story, which is like this kind of uh
Yeah,
western
sort of.
story of like a broken man, and it could be really serious and kind of not noiry, but like
Mm.
I'm not expecting like a genuinely soulful meditation here, but just a kind of more grounded, serious story. And
Yeah,
then there's also the other half of that film, which is like campy, but kind of somewhat grounded action, but with like a very
there's a sort of
Rodriguez flair to it.
sincerity to it that
Yeah,
underlines the camp.
a
Yeah.
sincerity indeed. Like it's all, especially with the framing of it being like a man out of place, like fish
Mm.
out of water, like he's not really meant to be doing this. There's a kind of relatability to it all. Like he's just a guy
Mm.
in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Mm.
Uh, the this film leans hard into the latter of campy ridiculousness. The story is abandoned, in my opinion, in terms of sincerity. It's still oddly loyal to it.
Yeah.
Well, apart from Bucho, uh, but in terms of feeling like I'm getting like something not taking the piss, that ship has sailed. With this
It
film.
it mm, it's really interesting. It does it. I think I like this film. At a moment watching
Okay.
it, well, I wondered, like, do I like Robert Rodriguez as a director? Because I've seen,
Yeah.
I think, at least 5 Robert Rodriguez films now, and I think my
Yeah.
favorites are the Spy Kids one. I think they're the most interesting ones. Even when they're
I
really bad, I think they're dealing with stuff and saying things.
in a very big Joel way.
Yeah, like Kids One is obviously a place like parents care about their kids and what a TV actually ties in the kids, and it's like this horrifying hellscape. Spy Kids 2 is dealing with the Steve Buscemi quote, you know, what if God doesn't come down here because he's scared of what he's created? Now that's a terrible film, but damn, that's a good concept to underpin a kids film on. And then Spy Kids 3 is this weird like post-humanist thing about like the
Yeah.
grandpa wants a body again and is willing to like kill people for it. And you get that great subversion of like the Chosen One with the Elijah Wood kid just like dying immediately. Like those are really interesting. I've decided that's my favorite Robert Rodriguez stuff. Lava Girl and Shark Boy
Yeah.
deals with like weird dream reality stuff. I'm into that.
Yeah.
But then on his major film, Sin City and vampire film, Double Dawn, and the Desperado films, they do lean into very conventional frat action conventions,
Yeah.
if that makes
Yeah.
sense. I think I kind
Definitely.
of like this film, even though I disagree that like it's not the type of aesthetic I tend to go for.
Yeah. So two things. I was when I was watching the film, I was just very curious as to how you were coming at it, because basically I'm glad that you sound like you responded to it this time, because Mariachi I feel like fell very flat for you, which is completely fair. Uh Secondly, I did this trilogy partly because I kind of wanted you to figure out how you felt about Robert Rodriguez, so I'm really excited to hear you say that, because I found a relationship with him fascinating, like how oddly, like how you are fascinated by his other films, and I wanted you to get like a broader look at it. And
How do you go from Mariachi to Shark Boy and Lava Girl to Alita
Sin
Battle Angel?
City,
That doesn't
yeah.
make sense.
No,
It's so
it's busy.
silly.
It is really weird. It is really
Yeah.
weird because there are obviously directors who do just kind of direct anything. Like, I would say like what the fuck is the Venom director doing? But the Venom director has never made like this trilogy, you know? Like he's never had a vision. And the thing you can say about these two films so far in the trilogy is these are fucking Robert Rodriguez
You bite
films.
your
Like
tongue.
these
Venom
are
looks
him.
fantastic.
I
Sorry, go on.
I
I haven't seen
Venom.
Venom, but I will defend it like to my dying breath. But yeah, no, go on.
uh and so I was weirdly sat there thinking I quite like Mariachi for like certain reasons. You know, I liked that it was kind of sincere, and I don't really mind that the plot took a
Mm,
backseat to action given that it was a student film and that kind of thing. And I thought the action was like I think sincerely done is a really nice way of putting it. I think and I the fish out of water stuff was cool.
mm,
Uh and this is a very different film with a lot more ridiculous action.
yeah,
And there are some great
yeah.
moments that I'm really fond of. Like I think if I watch this with this would be a film I love to watch kind of intoxicated with my friends. I say that, but at the same time,
Yeah.
there is a lot of this film that I just found very boring. There
Mm,
is actually not
yeah.
very much action
It's
in this
the
film.
parts where the people are talking.
Yeah, I was profoundly bored.
Well,
Like,
I do say that I do. Well, I disagree that this is boring. I didn't find it boring. I think
ah,
that in a way that betrays a kind of desire to be like interesting and artsy and like, oh, I like the interesting things, not the normal things. I'm a weirdo, kind of instinct that every like 21-year-old has. I
yeah,
think this film brings in a professionality that I really wanted in the first film, and
yeah,
and I can feel Tarantino's touch, and I don't love Tarantino, but there's a level of
okay,
quality control in Tarantino's like touch. Everything he
yes,
touches is kind of fine or really good. And
yeah,
and and here we have like some really good monologues. And it says this whole film was written by Robert. I don't fucking believe that. I believe that the Buscemi speech and Tarantino's speech were written by Tarantino. Like those are so Tarantino in tone versus
yeah, but
like
they're
the kind
all
of
at the
quite stilted
beginning.
dialogue elsewhere. Yeah, no, the same thing happens in Dusk Till Dawn. There's like a 45-minute long Tarantino film, and then it becomes a Rodriguez film. The dialogue
Yeah,
goes away, and it's replaced with like schlocky action. But the moment Buscemi enters the screen and is speaking, and it's like the gravity of like, oh shit, this is a real actor. Fuck, I'm like, that was
yeah,
so
no, that
exciting
was
for me.
great. That was
So
I
the
was so
production
excited.
values going up I was on a bit of a high from that.
Yeah, I can understand that, right? And I agree to an extent because I wouldn't want to get rid of the film's action and the way it is. And but all of the good stuff that this film has to offer that isn't action is in its first like half hour because I just think like well Steve Buscemi
Mm.
is barely in it and
Wait, I
Tarantino gets killed off and these are the only people that bring like a
life.
convincing presence to this film. Like
Mm.
I think I unironically love Antonio Banderas. Like
I
I think
think he's
he's
good in
great.
this. Yeah,
Yeah, no, he's good and he's
yeah.
fun, but I don't think he has the same presence of like
Mm.
really capturing and holding my attention. I'm normally
Yeah.
just like enjoying how fun his performance is in this film.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
outside of those three people, I'm fucking done. I don't think Salma Hayek has like ever been in anything good. And whenever she's on screen, I am so fucking done.
What?
When you talked about like the
Holy shit.
Tarantino touch on this film, you talked about the Tarantino touch in this
Totally.
film. I think it. I think she's so. I
That's
was
really
so
mean.
bored.
Hey, okay.
No, 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 no.
Keep
So
going, keep going.
you talked about the Tarantino touch on this film, and there's that scene in the book, in the bookstore, where like Antonio Banderas is like behind the bar in the
Hmm.
bookstore,
Hmm.
and the villain is in the room and he's kind of
Oh,
considering like
yeah.
killing him, but it's so boring. Like if that was a if that the
Hmm.
tense, no, it's not tense in the same
Hmm.
way that a
I
Tarantino scene
disagree.
can be tense. It's
I
not
disagree.
tense. I just can't take this fucking movie
Wow, I
seriously, and
can't
it keeps
believe
wanting
I'm
me to take
defending
it.
Mariachi. What's
No,
happening?
no, no. I would say I. Oh, no, because every time that
I
there wasn't
that's
action on the screen, I was
yeah.
so bored. I was
Okay.
so bored.
Well, this gets to the heart of my least favorite thing about Rodriguez is these are frat movies. Like every
Yeah,
like Banderas and Hayek's performances, no matter how good they can be, I especially think Banderas is very fun in this. They are kind of
mm,
it was bringing me back to very like trad feminist theory about film, right?
yeah,
They are both like a male gaze machine. Like everything they do is like male gazy and boring and
yeah.
misogyny,
I
right?
agree. But what I would say is Rodriguez shows more of his hand in this film, like without the kind of production, the low production quality setback of the first film. There's a lot
Mm,
more of stuff that feels like it's coming from his actual voice, and like you say, like I I just like the really stripped back romance of the first film is no longer justifiable here because they had money. Do you know what I mean? They had money and time to make something good, and they
mm,
didn't. So like stuff that I can forgive in the first one is kind of a lot more unforgivable here. And like you say, I it is a frat movie overall, but it has in the action scenes, it has like the heart of a fun, self-aware film, but that heart just
mm.
like, well, actually, well in the scenes that aren't action, I realized that they actually are just meant to be like pretty cool and like, I mean,
Yeah,
they are kind of cool,
yeah.
and actually, this isn't that self-aware, and and it's just like quite a boring action movie.
Well, it's self-aware, but it's not self-critical. Like
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
frat teenager who thinks that John Woo film is extremely cool and wants to make a film like that. And it's self-aware about how like silly it is and the pulpiness of it. Like this feels very like what they do with Grindhouse in a decade or
yeah,
so from now. Very like
yeah.
the point is how fun this is, but it's not like subversive or critical in a way that say like a Cabin Woods is. It's not really thoughtful in that way.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for, that cabin in the woods thing, or just like even if it wasn't like a very subversive story, just kind of a
Mm.
story, just
Yeah.
something. It's so poor in those scenes that aren't action. Like I'm so
Mm.
laid back. I'm really excited for the next film because that's when it sounds like it gets truly insane, like truly off the wall. That's what I'm looking for.
How interesting. Because looking at the trajectory of this trilogy, it looks like by the next film, it's just going to double down on the stuff you didn't like from the second film.
No,
Like, it's
because the
Johnny Depp. Like,
no,
it's going to
because
be
no,
more,
more
more of this.
competent and less interesting. Yeah, but at the same time, the premise of it is, bear with me. El Mariachi becomes involved in international espionage involving a psychotic CIA agent and a corrupt Mexican general. Like that sounds batshit and
Yeah.
really fun. Like the most wacky stuff in this film is the stuff with like his mariachi gang, which is given like no time, and I kind of love that. Like, and
Yeah,
it's
it's very
really out
good.
of nowhere and silly and like actually fun because all of the silliness of this film ends with the action. Like, I'm not asking for like a good story. I'm asking for something silly and fun, but it's actually just taking itself seriously. I feel
Yeah.
like it's really weird.
Mm.
It's a really weird film in that regard.
I,
Whereas I could understand El Mariachi taking itself seriously because it kind of has to, being so low budget. I just that's what I was talking about at the beginning of this, where there's like the sincerity of the first film, but there's also its campy funness, and you can lean into one,
mm.
but this film leans hard to the campiness in the action and leans really hard into the simple sincerity of the first one without developing it at all. So it's like I say, it keeps that simplicity, like it doesn't develop it at all. it doesn't make it fun or anything. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not a consistently fun film, and I really don't
Mm.
understand that. And I don't mean to like
Mm.
boil it down into like such simple terms, because obviously writing a film isn't that simple. But at the same time, it does seem so self-aware. I don't understand why he doesn't extend that self-awareness to the rest of the film. It's very
Mm.
like, because it's just people talking. Like it's just people talking a lot of the time. I
I
can remember
yeah.
so little of this film outside of the action.
I think in a weird way, watching his films has given me like a really great appreciation of Tarantino's craft. And I think that when you compare kind of like the opening scene of Buscemi, which I'm sorry, feels like a Tarantino scene, I don't believe that I genuinely believe that Tarantino was helping with direct Buscemi in that moment. Um
Mm, mm.
versus kind of the later scenes, the last half of the film, with kind of the romance and discovering about the brother and all that weird stuff. There's like
Yeah,
I can really vividly in my head picture all the little ways Tarantino creates like intrigue in that opening scene. Like you have
yeah,
like a bar of people who hate Buscemi on sight. Buscemi is extremely like obnoxious and drawing attention to himself. Like he stamps out
yeah.
his cigarette and keeps rubbing it into the ground so everyone looks. Um, and then he keeps like awkwardly referring to how good the beer tastes, even though they've preempted him that it would taste like shit, and saying, "Oh, this was a bar of real pieces of shit, not like you respectable gentlemen." Like this character's obviously very scared and trying to like control. And Tarantino's very good at capturing like it's not like deep or like saying things about I guess the human condition and whatnot,
No,
but
yeah,
very
yeah,
good at
yeah,
like every single element of the performance that Buscemi's giving creates intrigue and is like tense and also funny. And
yeah.
I think that's
Exactly.
completely obliterated by the time you get to like the bookstore scenes of the very stilted kind of dialogue performed very well at as best as they can. I think by
Yeah.
our lead man here. You know.
No, that's exactly what I mean is like that those opening moments of the film are a glimpse into what I think this film could be. If the whole film was framed that way of like, like if it kept the action that it currently has, and then the rest of it had that very Tarantino feeling, like dialogue scenes or like kind of less intense suspense scenes, I think it would be genuinely like fantastic. But there's such a hot and cold difference, like you said. Like if you put the bookstore scene like side by side, that with the one where Tarantino like tells that joke, which is really silly. Like it's a really silly scene, but
Mm.
it's like you say, it's like intriguing. It's like I'm not. I don't want a full film about the Tarantino character that you get in this film. But I'm like when he's on screen, I'm like, who is this guy? This is a really weird guy. Like, and it's I'm asking questions. Like I want to know more. Whereas whenever it's one of the other scenes, one of the other dialogue scenes, all of my questions are answered in the first 30 seconds because Rodriguez has such a like a very recognizable way of writing dialogue scenes, and it's
Yeah.
very cliche and very predictable.
Mm.
Like it's very, yeah, like there's very little about those scenes that's better than like exploitation films that this feels like it's inspired by. Like I just genuinely just think that Rodriguez has kind of managed to make a career on doing like exploitation level stories, just directed fairly well. Uh which is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I
okay, I'll give him this. I don't think he's good at writing dialogue. I think that I finally got my one-liner that I wanted in the first film. I really like the did I thank you? And then she's like, no, and he's like, I don't. What does he say next time?
he says like I'll thank you later
I'll
or
thank you
something.
later. Yeah, that's a good sign off. Uh, again, it's tied into like this kind of gross male archetype.
Yeah.
Um, uh, another thing I thought about was remember Anita Sarkeesian?
Yeah.
My
The
spiritual
woman
god.
who,
Yeah, my spiritual godmother.
yeah, did
Um,
very little wrong. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I
nothing
was just
wrong.
her podcast. They talked about Bond and how the new Bond film is still kind of misogynistic, even though it's basically like touting how cool it is they got a female writer in to fix it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Stuff like when he comes home and he realizes he'd been attacked at the gravesite, and he like violently grabs his girlfriend and shakes
yeah,
her. And there's a thing of like this type of male action hero where like they do violence against women, but it's justified. It's always like some
yeah,
weird like you betrayed me, and it's meant to be sexy. And I think it's about like, and when I talk about the male gaze here, I think a lot of this character is about like this fantasy about how men can interact with the world in a bodily way without consequence.
yeah,
And the thing of like, I like the cool line of him being like, "I'll thank you later," but it does play into that like, I can come in and be like physical with you and then just like disappear, and I'm always gonna
yeah.
be laissez-faire. And I don't, I'm not into that anymore, and I don't like that kind of action hero anymore. So
No.
that makes this tough, and I'm okay if this breed of action film dies out, even if I do think some of this is fun.
Two things is one is, I mean, it's just a weird recharacterization. Like the like I know he's kind of meant to be like a sort of broken guy, like he's sort of had his sort of heart
Hmm.
turned by the damaging effect of the first film. But I
Hmm.
still feel like that character by the end of the first one was meant to have like a good heart. But like in this one, yeah, he is just kind of like a dick who like hits Salma Hayek, and I'm just kind of there like I was enjoying Antonio Banderas' performance, but I'm like I really don't like this new Mariachi. He's
Hmm.
just a lot more like weird and gross. Uh and yeah, I think all that stuff with her becoming like kind of being on the side of the drug dealer. It's a similar thing with Bond of like women aren't really trustworthy in like these
Yeah.
action worlds. Like it's like kind of that's one I've seen, the new Bond film, and the thing that really bothered me about that scene was yeah, like just blame the woman, like I know James Bond is you can kind of justify it with things like, oh, James Bond doesn't really trust anyone, but when he's had such a legacy of being defined by like of being defined that way towards women, I just don't really buy into that. I just think it's like it was a really weird moment of like, this is weird, like that he's just jumped straight to this, and like at least direct it less physically,
Like the good version of that in the Bond film is when and Anita pointed to that as well, when they stop in the car and they're shooting at the car and he just lets them keep shooting while his girlfriend is
Yeah,
extremely afraid. And that's
yeah,
a very good way of Bond like
testing
stoically
her.
being like, "Hey, look, this is what you did. Like, we're in the
Yeah,
situation because of you. I want you to feel what I feel all the time." And that's a really like horrible, abusive thing to do, but like artistically, it's being portrayed in a way that is interesting and says something about the character rather than just kind of like playing into tropes of how we justify like how it's cool when men shake women in films and it's
yeah,
like
that's
sexy and
exactly what I
masculine
mean.
and yeah.
That's exactly what I was trying to get across of like, you can justify it with story as much as you want, but just at the end of the day, all of these films with a weird attitude towards women just do that. There is always a point where they shake the woman because they've broken their trust. And
Yeah.
like that obviously plays into like, as well as being like violent, it plays into like misogynistic attitudes towards women. Um and like just shows the roles that they're assigned to in these films as well.
Mm.
Uh but yeah, that's that's Desperado. I yeah, I think we can do our recommendations. Had, I would say the highs of this film were higher than Mariachi, but then everything around that stuff is, it's so well. Apart from the stuff we talked about in the film's like first half an hour,
Mm.
it's so boring. And really exposes the like minimal talent that like was kind of hidden by the low production of Mariachi, and is really like shone very unforgivingly on by the more like the higher scale production of this film. So I would give this a, I think in terms of the setting where I think this film should be watched, which is like with a group of friends semi-intoxicated, I would give this a weak recommend because I
Hmm.
think the moments of like those moments that I mentioned just now are worth it. I think watching that with a group of friends would be like hilarious and memorable. But I don't know. But look, maybe warn your mates that everything around that really isn't very interesting, and you might be low key fast forwarding through them. So yeah, weak recommend from me.
Yeah, I'm at a weak recommend too. Again, I think it struggles with thematic dissonance in the same way the first one did. Where I feel like the interesting thing to have done, if you wanted a more kind of thoughtful, subversive take on like pulpy action hero dude, is it's really interesting that in the opening scene we're introduced to the image of the mariachi with Buscemi's monologue about how
Oh,
the
that was
lights
so
dim for him
good.
and I don't see his face, I just see his eyes and you know how huge he is. And then that cuts to like Mariachi slumping on the bed throwing a tantrum uh and realizing that this is an image he's constructing to scare people in like a very like Batman way. And I was like, oh, this is going to be really interesting. Like in the actual real action scenes, he's going to be much more like improvisational and like, uh, you know, amateur. He's
Yeah,
not going to be like horrifying. And
because
and
he is
yeah,
an amateur.
yeah. And then we cut to like, his first big action scene in like reality where, he someone's on him and he kicks them into the air and like literally like Devil May Cry physics, like joggles them in the air with his bullets, and that's how he kills them. And all the kind of um gesticulation towards any sort of thoughtfulness or subversiveness is gone, and it's like, okay, we have fun action scenes, and there's little to nothing else
Little
being said
else.
here.
Yeah.
Unlike Spy Kids, which as I said, are saying many things and are interesting. um, uh, so I'm also going to give this a weak recommend, but yeah, it's very shallow, I think.
Yeah, I'm really glad you pointed that out because the first 10 minutes of this film are really promising, and I think that's a big part of the experience to highlight uh the contrast. And I think it really exposes how any kind of quality from this film in terms of like actual like clever writing decisions and contrasts is just accidental. I think just kind of imagery he's seen elsewhere replicated. Like you say, like it's really easy to show a mysterious man walking into a bar. Uh, and yeah, like you say, it seems like it's a setup for an interesting subversion. Actually, he just thinks it's cool when a armed man walks into a bar mysteriously. Uh, and I just think that's Rodriguez really at this point. So
Yeah.
yeah. So next week we've got our switcheroo.
Oh yeah.
Uh, well, what film are we doing?
So we are going to do a duology.
Oh,
uh, but not a real one that I made up. To fit
okay,
this, to bring the Joanna Newsom retrospective back, and bringing it into the switcheroo realm. We're
okay.
going to be discussing her two films that she has done, um, which are Pop Star and Inherent Vice. So
Awesome.
these will be two separate episodes because Inherent Vice is really complicated and long. Um, So there's no way I could cram that into 20 minutes of discussion. But yeah, that's what's going to be happening. And the only thing that connects these films are the presence of Joanna Newsom. So there you go.
Awesome. Okay. That is very on brand picks from you. Uh, thank you very much for listening. Uh, yeah, stay tuned for the third part of our review, which will be coming up in a few episodes' time, where we cap
Yeah.
off the trilogy, talk about Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Thanks very much for listening. Bye.
Bye.